The galaxy was vast, its stars like scattered embers in the black void. Between these stars were the remnants of countless wars, a tapestry of destruction that marked the progress of advanced civilizations. Among these, the humans were newcomers, barely scratching the surface of interstellar exploration, but their arrival on the galactic stage had been anything but quiet. Whispers spread like wildfire through the trade hubs and communication relays. Humans were dangerous. Humans couldn't be trusted. Humans were predators. The first reports came from the Tarluxians, an ancient and dignified species whose translucent, amber-glowing bodies pulsed faintly with each thought they shared. They were not a warrior species, but their intellect and diplomacy had made them revered across the galaxy. It was their ambassador, a figure of serene beauty and soft luminescence, who first stood before the Galactic Council to denounce the humans. Honored Council, the Tarluxian's voice resonated like a harmonious chord, vibrating gently in the vast chamber. The humans have unleashed horrors upon the stars. They do not engage in battle as warriors do, face to face, bound by honor. They kill from the shadows, silent and unseen. Their so-called arms of silence violate every code of war. They are not soldiers, they are predators. A murmur rippled through the council chamber. Delegates from dozens of species, each distinct in their appearance and temperament, leaned toward their translators, ensuring they had understood the accusation correctly. The Varalox, towering beings with metallic skin that shimmered like liquid, silver and eyes that glowed an unsettling, piercing blue, were among the first to respond. Their leader, Var Elkoth, rose with a sharp metallic hiss, his voice reverberating like the hum of a massive engine. "If the Tarluxians, the most peaceful of us all, declare the humans a threat, then we cannot ignore it. These arms of silence, what are they? What have these humans done?" The Tarluxian ambassador hesitated, their glowing form dimming slightly, a sign of deep sorrow. "They hunt," they said simply, "with precision unlike anything we have ever seen. Our greatest scientist, Fenmore Aleth, was found lifeless in his observatory on Brelian 5. No sound, no trace. The only evidence was a wound too precise to be natural. The human, their weapons do not roar like ours. They do not clash with honor. They end life without a sound, without a warning." The council chamber erupted in outrage. Delegates shouted, in their native tongues, demanding retribution, demanding justice. Screens flickered to life across the chamber, displaying images of lifeless bodies. Leaders, scientists, warriors, all taken by the same precise, silent strike. The humans had introduced something terrifying to the galaxy, something that none of the other species had encountered before: surgical, emotionless precision. Amidst the chaos, a voice cut through like a blade. It belonged to the Ravkars, a race of reptilian giants with thick-scaled hides and 3 powerful legs that carried their massive forms. Their representative, Kral Tanak, slammed a clawed hand onto the council table, his serrated teeth bared. "This spectre they speak of, this so-called sniper, it is no warrior, it is a coward. And yet it mocks us by walking freely through our systems. This cannot stand." The council agreed unanimously. A bounty was declared, the largest ever issued in galactic history. The human sniper, known only by the codename Spectre, was to be hunted and eliminated. Every species was invited to join the hunt, from the predatory Nektal, whose crystalline tentacles shimmered with deadly energy, to the nomadic fleets of the Karis, whose sleek, bird-like forms darted through the void with unmatched speed. The galaxy had turned its collective might against a single being. But as the meeting dissolved into smaller discussions and plans, one question lingered, unspoken but heavy in the air. How had a species so young, so inexperienced in the grand conflicts of the galaxy, created a weapon and a warrior capable of striking fear into the hearts of the most powerful civilizations? Far from the opulent chambers of the Galactic Council, on a barren world of endless dunes and crimson skies, the answer to that question sat alone in silence. Spectre, Ethan Cade, cleaned his rifle with deliberate care. His face was weathered, not by age but by experience. His grey eyes scanned the horizon, their intensity sharp and unwavering. Ethan's hideout was nestled in a jagged outcrop of red rock, hidden from aerial detection by the planet's natural magnetic storms. The air was thin and bitterly cold, but he didn't mind. Solitude had become his ally. Beside him floated Zeta, a compact drone whose spherical body flickered with faint blue light as it monitored the surrounding area. "They know you're here, Ethan," Zeta said, its synthetic voice calm but insistent. Ethan smirked, running a finger along the barrel of his rifle. "Let them come," he muttered, his voice low and gravelly. "They think they're hunting me, but they don't understand. This isn't a game they can win." Zeta's light pulsed in a pattern that indicated disapproval. "The Tarluxians have labeled you a predator. The Ravkars are calling for blood. Even the Varilox have joined the hunt. You've managed to unite species that have been at odds for centuries. Impressive, but also problematic." Ethan leaned back against the rock wall, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon, where the first stars of night began to emerge. "They hate what they don't understand," he said, his tone laced with bitterness. "To them, I'm not human, I'm a monster. But if they knew what they did to us, if they knew why I fight—" He trailed off, his jaw tightening as memories surfaced, memories of flames consuming his village on Mars, of alien ships descending from the sky, their weapons tearing through his home without mercy. He remembered the screams, the chaos, the helplessness. He had been a boy then, powerless to stop it, but now he was something else entirely. Zeta interrupted his thoughts. "They're coming, Ethan. Multiple fleets, Nektal, Ravkars, even some Tarluxian vessels. They've tracked you to XR Prime." Ethan's smirk returned, though it lacked humor. "Good," he said, rising to his feet and slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "Let them see what a predator really looks like." As the night deepened and the stars brightened, the first faint glimmers of ships appeared on the horizon, their lights cutting through the darkness like predatory eyes. The hunt had begun, and Ethan Cade was ready. Unbeknownst to his pursuers, the sands of XR Prime would soon run red. But even as he prepared for the battle to come, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Somewhere, out there beyond the fleets converging on his position, a greater truth awaited, a truth that could change the galaxy forever. On XR Prime, the crimson skies boiled with magnetic storms, their turbulent currents painting the horizon in shades of orange and deep red. Beneath these volatile skies, Ethan Cade adjusted his armor with practiced efficiency. The battered plate, scratched from countless encounters, bore no insignias, just a dull matte black designed to blend with the shadows. His rifle, a masterpiece of human ingenuity, lay across his lap. The weapon, sleek and imposing, was far more than a tool. It was an extension of himself. The planet's barren surface stretched endlessly, dotted with jagged outcroppings of red rock and shifting dunes of fine, silicate sand. The air was thin and carried a biting chill, but it didn't bother Ethan. He had chosen XR Prime precisely because of its inhospitable environment. Few life forms could survive here, and those that could often avoided confrontation. It was the perfect place for someone like him, someone hunted. As he worked, Zeta hovered beside him, its small, spherical frame emitting a faint blue glow. The drone's various sensors whirred softly, scanning the perimeter for any signs of activity. "We've got movement," Zeta reported, its synthetic voice tinged with urgency. "Multiple fleets are descending into the lower atmosphere. They're triangulating your position." Ethan didn't look up. Instead, he calmly reassembled his rifle, snapping components into place with an audible series of clicks. "Let them come," he said, his tone devoid of fear. "This place isn't their home." "Turf, it's mine," Zeta pulsed in irritation. "Ethan, these aren't amateurs. The Nektal are leading the assault. Their crystalline biosensors are specifically designed to detect heat and motion signatures. You won't be able to stay hidden for long." Ethan finally glanced up, his grey eyes sharp and focused. "They'll find what they're looking for," he muttered, "but it won't be what they expect." The first of the invading ships pierced through the atmosphere, leaving trails of ionized plasma in their wake. The Nektal vessels resembled enormous jellyfish made of shimmering crystal, their translucent hulls refracting the light into dazzling, rainbow-like patterns. Each ship was surrounded by a network of pulsating tentacle-like appendages, glowing, with an eerie blue bioluminescence. As the ships landed, the appendages extended into the ground, anchoring the vessels and beginning their scans. From the belly of the lead ship, the Nektal troops emerged. Their forms were both beautiful and unnerving, tall semi-humanoid creatures with translucent glass-like bodies that pulsed faintly with energy. Their limbs were long and elegant, ending in sharp, claw-like protrusions that could carve through most known materials. Their heads bore no eyes or mouth, only smooth, domed surfaces that glowed faintly. They communicated through vibrations and high-pitched tones, their movements synchronized as if controlled by a single mind. Ethan observed them from a distance, his form hidden among the jagged rocks. He adjusted his rifle's scope, calibrating for the atmospheric distortion caused by XR Prime's magnetic storms. Through the lens, he watched as the Nektal began their systematic sweep of the terrain, their biosensors glowing brightly with each pulse. 2 squads, 10 meters apart, Ethan murmured, his voice barely audible. Their patterns are tight, overlapping coverage, they've learned. That's what makes them dangerous, Zeta replied, but you've outsmarted them before. Ethan smirked faintly, lining up his first shot. And I'll outsmart them again. The rifle's energy core hummed softly as it charged. Ethan exhaled slowly, his finger tightening on the trigger. The shot was silent, the only indication of its release being the slight recoil against his shoulder. A moment later, one of the Nektal troops collapsed, its crystalline body shattering into a cascade of glittering shards. The remaining Nektal reacted instantly, their synchronization uncanny. They raised their glowing appendages, projecting a shimmering energy field around their squad. Ethan cursed under his breath. Adaptive shielding. That's new. Zeta's voice cut in. They're learning from you. Every time you engage, they adapt. Good, Ethan said, already on the move. It'll make this more interesting. He darted between the rocks, his movements fluid and precise. The magnetic storms above crackled loudly, masking the sound of his footsteps. The Nektal, however, weren't the only threat. In the distance, he spotted the hulking forms of Ravkar warriors. Their massive reptilian bodies towered over the landscape, their scaled hides gleaming like polished obsidian. Each carried a massive energy pike, the weapon crackling with unstable plasma. Ethan didn't engage. The Ravkars were blunt instruments, brutish and relentless. He needed to thin their numbers first. Moving with practiced stealth, he set up a series of remote charges along a narrow canyon. The charges were small but powerful, designed to create a controlled collapse. As the Ravkars advanced, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground, Ethan waited patiently. The canyon funneled them into a tight formation, their size working against them in the confined space. When the lead Ravkar was directly above the charges, Ethan triggered them. The explosion was deafening, the ground buckling as tons of rock collapsed into the canyon. Dust and debris filled the air, obscuring the devastation. Ethan didn't wait to see the results. He moved again, knowing that the others would soon converge on his position. You're outnumbered, Zeta warned, and they're coordinating. The Tarluxians have joined the effort. Their drones are sweeping the southern quadrant. Ethan gritted his teeth, his mind racing. The Tarluxians were masters of reconnaissance, their drones small and nearly impossible to detect. If they locked onto his position, the rest of the forces would close in within minutes. Then I'll give them something to chase, Ethan said, his tone grim. He activated a decoy device, a small orb that emitted false heat and motion signatures. Tossing it into the distance, he watched as several Tarluxian drones veered toward it. Buying time won't work forever, Zeta said. What's the plan, Ethan? Ethan paused, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon where more ships were descending. His grip tightened on his rifle. The plan, he said, his voice cold, is to remind them why they're afraid of me. As the forces closed in, Ethan prepared for the battle ahead. The sands of XR Prime would soon bear witness to a deadly game of cat and mouse, one where the prey was far more dangerous than the hunters. And yet, even as he readied himself, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this fight was just the prelude to something much larger. Somewhere out there, in the vast expanse of the galaxy, the true enemy was watching, waiting for its moment to strike. The red sands of Ixar Prime trembled under the weight of marching forces. The Ravkars, towering reptilian giants with jet-black scales, advanced in tight formation. Their energy pikes crackled with volatile plasma, casting an eerie glow across the barren landscape. Above them, Nectal drones circled in a synchronized pattern, their crystalline bodies refracting the dim light of the planet's twin suns into dazzling beams. Ethan Cade crouched behind a jagged rock formation, his breathing steady, his mind racing. He adjusted the settings on his rifle, recalibrating for the shifting magnetic interference in the atmosphere. Zeta hovered beside him, its faint blue glow providing just enough light to illuminate the tactical map displayed on its surface. "They're closing in," Zeta reported, its synthetic voice tinged with urgency. "Ravkars from the west, Nectal drones from the east. Tarluxian scout units are deploying in the southern quadrant." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He scanned the horizon through the scope of his rifle, tracking the movement of the Ravkars. Their bulky forms moved with surprising coordination, their heavy footsteps creating small tremors in the ground. The magnetic storms overhead crackled with energy, casting flickering shadows across the landscape. "This isn't a standard hunt," Ethan muttered, his voice low. "They're working together. Nectal providing air support, Ravkars pushing. Ground assault, and Tarluxians running recon, someone's pulling the strings." Zeta pulsed in agreement. "The coordination is unprecedented. They've learned from previous failures. They're treating you as a high-priority target. This isn't just about revenge anymore." Ethan smirked, his lips curving into a bitter grin. "Good. That means I've made an impression." The first Ravkar squad reached the edge of his perimeter. Ethan watched through his scope as the massive creatures scanned the terrain with handheld devices that emitted low-frequency pulses. Each pulse sent ripples through the sand, searching for irregularities. "They've upgraded their tech," Zeta observed. "Ground-penetrating sensors. They're trying to flush you out." Ethan's hand moved to his utility belt, retrieving a small spherical device. "Let's give them something to find," he said, activating the decoy and tossing it toward the advancing Ravkars. The device emitted a faint heat signature and sporadic movement patterns, mimicking a living target. The Ravkars reacted immediately. Two of them raised their energy pikes, the tips glowing brighter as they charged for a strike. The lead Ravkar barked an order in its guttural language, and the others spread out, encircling the decoy. Ethan waited until they were fully exposed before pulling the trigger. His shot was silent, but the result was immediate. The lead Ravkar collapsed. A clean hole burned through its thick skull. The others roared in anger, their formation breaking as they scrambled for cover. "That's one down," Ethan muttered, already moving to a new position. Zeta followed. Closely, its sensors scanning for threats. "You've bought yourself some time, but the Nectal drones are adapting. They're focusing their scans on thermal anomalies." Ethan cursed under his breath. The Nectal drones were notoriously efficient at detecting heat signatures, and even the best stealth technology couldn't keep him hidden forever. He activated his suit's cooling system, reducing his body's heat signature to near ambient levels. Above him, the drones shifted their formation, their crystalline appendages glowing faintly as they synchronized their scans. Ethan could see them clearly now, their translucent bodies shimmering like glass sculptures in the sunlight. They moved with eerie precision, their patterns designed to leave no area unchecked. "They're relentless," Zeta commented. "We need to find a way to disrupt their coordination." Ethan's eyes flicked to a rocky outcrop in the distance. Embedded within the rock was a cluster of unstable magnetic crystals, their faint glow visible even from his position. He had noticed them earlier while setting up his traps, and now they presented an opportunity. "If I can hit those crystals," Ethan said, "the magnetic disruption might throw off their synchronization." "It's a long shot," Zeta warned, "but it's our best option." Ethan adjusted his rifle, aligning the shot. The wind howled around him, carrying the faint metallic taste of charged particles. He exhaled slowly, his focus narrowing to the glowing crystals. With a steady hand, he pulled the trigger. The shot struck true. The crystals erupted in a burst of energy, sending a wave of magnetic interference rippling through the air. The Nectal drones faltered, their movements becoming erratic as their systems struggled to compensate. "That'll keep them busy," Ethan said, already moving toward his next position. But his reprieve was short-lived. A new threat emerged. From the southern quadrant, Tarluxian scout units. Their slender, translucent forms glided effortlessly across the sand, their amber bodies pulsating with rhythmic light. Unlike the Ravkars and Nectal, the Tarluxians were not warriors. They were strategists, their strength lying in their ability to gather and relay information with unparalleled efficiency. "They're triangulating your position," Zeta said. "If they relay your location to the others, you'll be surrounded." Ethan clenched his jaw, his mind racing. The Tarluxians weren't heavily armored, but their speed and agility made them difficult targets. He needed to act quickly. Reaching into his pack, he retrieved a small EMP device. It was a last resort tool, designed to disable electronic systems within a limited radius. If he could get close enough to the Tarluxians, the EMP might give him the edge he needed. "Cover me," Ethan said, sprinting toward the Tarluxians. Zeta followed, its small frame darting through the air as it provided a constant feed of tactical data. The Tarluxians detected Ethan's movement and immediately shifted their focus, their glowing bodies pulsing faster as they relayed the information to the Ravkars and Nectal. Ethan activated the EMP just as he closed the distance. The device emitted a high-pitched whine before releasing a burst of energy. The Tarluxians' lights flickered and dimmed, their communication network disrupted. "They're down," Zeta reported, "but the others are converging. You've got about 5 minutes before they reach you." Ethan nodded, his expression grim. "Plenty of time," he said, though his tone betrayed the strain of the battle. As the storm clouds above crackled with energy, Ethan prepared for the next wave. The odds were stacked against him, but he had survived worse. Still, a nagging thought lingered at the back of his mind. Who was coordinating this attack, and what did they truly want? Far above the chaos, hidden within the shadows of a massive starship, the answer watched and waited. For the forces on XR Prime, Ethan Cade was the prey, but for the one pulling the strings, he was the key to something far greater. The skies above XR Prime burned with streaks of plasma as more ships descended onto the crimson sands, their hulls gleaming with the reflected fury of the planet's twin suns. Ethan Cade, battered but resolute, crouched behind a jagged outcrop of stone. His breathing was steady, his mind sharp, but he knew his situation was dire. The coordinated assault had closed in on him faster than he anticipated. Every move he made was calculated, but the forces hunting him were relentless, and their numbers were overwhelming. Zeta hovered beside him, its faint blue light flickering in patterns that reflected its processing strain. "Ethan, the perimeter is collapsing. Ravkars to the west, Tarluxians advancing from the south, and the Nectal drones have regrouped. We're out of fallback options." Ethan ran a hand through his sweat-matted hair and tightened his grip on his rifle. "We're not out of options yet," he said, scanning the terrain through his scope. His eyes landed on a narrow gorge to the east, its entrance barely wide enough to accommodate 2 Ravkars side by side. "If I can funnel them into that gorge, I can slow them down." Zeta's sensors pulsed rapidly. "You mean to set a trap?" "It's the only way," Ethan replied, already moving toward the gorge. His steps were quick but deliberate, each one leaving faint prints in the fine red sand. The wind howled around him, carrying the metallic tang of the planet's magnetic storms. The gorge was a natural bottleneck, its walls jagged and sharp. Ethan knew it was his best chance to even the odds. He reached into his pack and pulled out a set of remote charges, their sleek metallic casings glinting under the harsh sunlight. He placed them strategically along the walls, his movements methodical and precise. As he worked, Zeta's voice broke through the silence. "The Tarluxians have detected your movement. They're rerouting their scout units. ETA. 3 minutes." Ethan gritted his teeth. "I need more time." "You don't have it," Zeta replied, its tone coldly logical. "You need to move now." Ethan finished placing the last charge and retreated deeper into the gorge. He positioned himself at a vantage point, his rifle resting on a natural ledge. Through his scope, he watched as the first wave of Ravkars entered the gorge. Their massive forms moved with an air of caution, their energy pikes raised and ready. Ethan waited, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. He needed them to advance, further, to draw more of their forces into the trap. The Ravkars growled in their guttural language, their voices echoing off the canyon walls. Behind them, the faint shimmer of Nektal drones appeared, their crystalline bodies glowing as they scanned the area. "Almost there," Ethan whispered to himself, his eyes narrowing. His breath slowed, his focus narrowing to the target. The lead Ravkar stepped onto one of the pressure-sensitive triggers Ethan had buried in the sand. A muffled click echoed through the gorge, followed by a deafening explosion. The walls of the canyon shook as chunks of rock rained down, crushing the Ravkars and forcing the Nektal drones to scatter. "Direct hit," Zeta reported, "but the Nektal are repositioning. They're compensating for the disruption." Ethan shifted his aim, targeting one of the drones. His shot was precise, the energy bolt slicing through the air and shattering the crystalline body of the drone. Its fragments fell like shards of glass, catching the sunlight in a cascade of colors. But the victory was short-lived. The Tarluxians had arrived. Their slender, glowing forms moved with unsettling speed, their amber bodies pulsating in perfect rhythm. They carried no weapons, but relied on their unparalleled ability to coordinate the forces around them. "They're relaying your position," Zeta warned. "Ravkar reinforcements are already on their way." Ethan didn't hesitate. He activated the remaining charges, the explosions creating a wall of rubble that temporarily blocked the gorge. Dust filled the air, obscuring the battlefield. "That won't hold them for long," Zeta said. "We need to fall back." Ethan nodded, retreating toward higher ground. The magnetic storms above crackled, their energy arcing across the sky like jagged lightning. The environment itself seemed to mirror the chaos below, as if the planet was rebelling against the forces tearing it apart. As Ethan reached a plateau, he turned to face Zeta. "What's our status?" Zeta's sensors flickered as it processed the data. "The Ravkars are regrouping. The Nektal have deployed advanced drones, and the Tarluxians are triangulating our escape routes. They're not letting up." Ethan took a deep breath, his mind racing. He glanced at the horizon, where the faint outline of a massive ship loomed in the distance. It was larger than any of the vessels he had encountered so far, its dark silhouette menacing against the backdrop of the storm. "What is that?" Ethan asked, his voice tense. Zeta hesitated. "Unidentified ship. It's not part of the known fleets in this operation." Ethan's grip tightened on his rifle. "Then who does it belong to?" Before Zeta could respond, a beam of energy shot from the ship, striking the ground near the Ravkars. The impact sent shockwaves rippling through the sand, forcing both the hunters and Ethan to pause. The beam wasn't an attack, it was a signal, a deliberate act meant to draw attention. Ethan's eyes narrowed as he watched the chaos unfold. The forces converging on him began to hesitate, their coordination faltering. The Tarluxians pulsed with frantic light, their attempts to communicate disrupted by the presence of the massive ship. "Someone's interfering," Zeta said. "This wasn't part of their plan." Ethan's heart raced as he watched the ship descend slowly, its hull bristling with unknown technology. It was unlike anything he had seen before. Whoever controlled it wasn't here to save him, but they weren't here for the others either. As the ship's landing ramp extended, a new figure emerged, cloaked in shadows. The forces of Ixar Prime paused, their attention drawn to this enigmatic arrival. Ethan adjusted his scope, trying to get a better look at the figure, but the magnetic storms blurred the image. "They've come for you," Zeta said, its voice almost a whisper. "But why?" Ethan didn't answer. His instinct screamed at him to run, but his curiosity rooted him in place. For the first time in years, he felt the icy grip of uncertainty. He didn't know who this new player was, but one thing was clear. They held the key to the questions. That had haunted him since the beginning of his fight, and they weren't leaving without him. The landing ramp of the massive ship descended slowly, its edges glowing faintly with a pulsating violet light. The figure that emerged was cloaked in shadows, their form obscured by the interference of the planet's magnetic storms. Around them, the battlefield fell into an uneasy silence. The Ravkars paused, their guttural growls quieting as their hulking forms turned toward the newcomer. The Nektal drones hovered in mid-air, their crystalline bodies refracting the faint light of the twin suns. Even the Taluxians, whose bodies pulsed with light in rhythmic communication, stopped their movements, their amber hues dimming in uncertainty. Ethan Cade adjusted his rifle's scope, his heart pounding as he tried to make out the details of the mysterious figure. The magnetic interference distorted the image, leaving their features blurred, but one thing was certain. This was no ordinary arrival. "Who the hell are they?" Ethan muttered under his breath. Zeta hovered closer, its sensors scanning the ship and its occupant. Unidentified. Their technology doesn't match any known galactic fleet. No transmissions, no signatures. Whoever they are, they don't want to be recognized. The figure took a single step forward, their movement deliberate, almost predatory. A faint hum emanated from their body, resonating across the battlefield like a low-frequency vibration. Ethan felt it in his chest, a deep, unsettling sensation that seemed to bypass his armor and strike directly at his core. The Ravkars, ever brash and confident, broke the silence first. One of the warriors, towering and heavily armored, raised their energy pike and roared a challenge. The sound echoed across the red sands, a clear demand for the figure to identify themselves or face their wrath. The figure didn't respond. Instead, they raised a hand, their fingers elongating and glowing with an unnatural light, as if they were drawing energy from the very air around them. The hum intensified, and in an instant the Ravkar warrior was lifted off the ground, their massive form flailing helplessly. A split second later, they were thrown backward with a force that shook the ground, their body landing in a crumpled heap several meters away. Ethan's breath caught. What the hell was that? "Gravitational manipulation," Zeta replied, its voice unusually quiet. "That kind of precision, I've never seen anything like it." The other Ravkars hesitated, their confidence visibly shaken. The Nektal drones shifted uneasily, their crystalline bodies emitting faint, discordant tones. The Taluxians, meanwhile, seemed almost paralyzed, their glowing forms dimming further as if in submission. The figure turned their attention to Ethan, and even at a distance, he felt their gaze like a physical weight. Through the scope, he caught a brief glimpse of their face, a mask-like visage with flowing, intricate patterns that seemed to shift and shimmer as though alive. Their eyes, if they could be called that, burned with a cold, unearthly light. "They know you," Zeta said, its tone flat. "And they're coming for you." Ethan's instincts screamed at him to run, but his feet remained rooted to the spot. He adjusted his rifle, aiming directly at the figure's head. "If they're coming for me, they'll have to earn it." The figure stopped suddenly, as if sensing Ethan's intent. With a slow, deliberate motion, they extended a hand toward him. A strange energy began to ripple through the air, visible even from Ethan's position. The rocks around him trembled, and the very ground beneath his feet seemed to shift. "Ethan," Zeta warned, "this isn't like anything you've faced before. We need to retreat, now." But Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger. "No, if they're here for me, I need to know why." He fired. The energy bolt streaked through the air, cutting across the distance in an instant. But just as it was about to hit its target, the figure raised their hand, and the bolt froze mid-air. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The bolt hovered, its energy crackling and flickering, before dissipating into nothingness. Ethan's eyes widened. "What the—" Before he could finish, the figure made a sweeping gesture, and a massive force slammed into him, sending him flying backward. He hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind out of him. His rifle skittered across the sand out of reach. "Ethan!" Zeta's voice was sharp, panicked. The drone hovered protectively over him, its sensors whirring frantically. "You're injured. We need to move." Ethan groaned, pushing himself up onto one elbow. His head spun and his vision blurred, but he forced himself to focus. The figure was moving closer now, their steps slow and deliberate, as if savoring the moment. "Why aren't they finishing me off?" Ethan muttered, coughing as he struggled to his feet. "If they wanted me dead, they'd have done it by now." "They don't want to kill you," Zeta said. "They want you alive." Ethan's mind raced. His usual strategies, traps, precision strikes, tactical retreats, felt useless against this enemy. Whoever this was, they were operating on a level far beyond anything he'd encountered before. As the figure closed the distance, they finally spoke. Their voice was layered, as if multiple tones were speaking in unison. "Ethan Cade, you are not what they say you are." Ethan froze. "What are you talking about?" The figure tilted their head, the shifting patterns on their mask glowing brighter. "You've been lied to, manipulated. The Force is hunting you. They fear you, but not for the reasons you think." Ethan clenched his fists. "Then tell me, what do they want?" The figure stepped closer, their presence overwhelming. "Not here, not now, but you will learn the truth. And when you do, the galaxy will never be the same." Before Ethan could respond, the figure raised their hand again, and a wave of energy engulfed him. His vision blurred, and the world around him seemed to dissolve. He felt himself falling, though there was no ground beneath him, only an endless void. Zeta's voice echoed faintly in his ears. "Ethan, Ethan, stay with me." And then everything went dark. When Ethan's senses returned, he was no longer on Ixar Prime. The red sands, the magnetic storms, the relentless hunters, all of it was gone. He found himself in a vast chamber, its walls glowing faintly with a soft, ethereal light. The air was still, heavy with an unspoken tension. In the center of the chamber stood the figure, their mask now removed, revealing a face that was both alien and familiar, a blend of features that defied comprehension. They spoke again, their voice echoing in the emptiness. "Welcome, Ethan Cade. You've just taken your first step toward understanding what you truly are."